Hello and welcome to The Backlash. I'm your host, David J. Riley. Here it is Monday, February 16th. Thank you all for joining us. Please make sure that you like this stream, that you follow us on all of our platforms, including x.com at Real Backlash. You can support our podcast on subscribestar.com/The Backlash, patreon.com/The Backlash. You can also send in super chats and any questions that you have for either me or our guests at thebacklash.net/superchat. We've got a power chat and an entropy if you're not on either YouTube or Rumble. But speaking of, please follow us on YouTube. We are live over there and can accept super chats, and on Rumble. You can send in your Rumble rants there. You can find all of our platforms at thebacklash.net/subscribe. We are everywhere. You could want to find a good quality podcast. Rumble, Apple Podcast, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Primal. We're all over the place. So thank you so much for joining us today. We've got to give a brief shout out to all of our sponsors. ODGG Supply. Whether you're going blankie mode or going gorilla mode, if you need thermals, blankets, rucksacks, or night vision, odggsupply.com is your place to get tacked out. Over at AboveTimeCoffee.com, they are an amazing coffee roaster, hand roasted, small batch, white positive coffee, and Antelope Hill Publishing. They are fighting to keep history alive amidst a regime of anti-white censorship. That's AntelopeHillPublishing.com, North Idaho Tallow at IdahoTallow.com, and AtlasBullion.com/backlash. Thank you so much for joining me today. In case you missed it, I'll just give a brief thing. There's been a little change here in the show. Rebecca and Cameron have resigned from the show, so it's going to be me and you and our wonderful guests going forward. So if you didn't catch that, you can go back. I did a live stream on Friday where I talked about our statement, and you can get some more information over there. But in the meantime, I do want to let you know that we've got an incredible week of guests lined up for you. Let me pull up the tweet here. It's going to be pretty awesome. We've got today Dark Enlightenment, who I'll be introducing in just a moment. On Wednesday, we're going to be talking with Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports, Honest Pollster. He does a lot of polling. It's going to be really good to break out of the bubble and find out what actual people in America are thinking about our current situation. Friday, we're going to be talking to HoMath. On the following Monday, February 23rd, we're going to be talking to Ohio gubernatorial candidate Casey Putsch. And on Monday, March 2nd, we're going to be talking to Carl Dahl, author of Faction with the Resistance. He did a couple of really interesting books about like a future civil war in America, and he also did a historical fiction book about the Spanish Civil War. So we're really looking forward to talking to him. But in the meantime, wasting no more of your time, I want to introduce our guest, Dark Enlightenment. Dark Enlightenment has been around for a long time in this space. Hold on, I've got some overlays, I guess. Overlay, yeah. Let's get rid of that. Dark Enlightenment has been around for a long time in the space, publishing under several different pseudonyms for the past decade. I don't really want to say too much. Maybe I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more. He's the co-host of the Fundamental Principle podcast. Dark Enlightenment, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. If I could just say a couple quick words. Your sponsors are awesome, and I've used some of them, and they're great.
Good.
And if you live anywhere cold, go to ODGC Supply, use the correct code, and get yourself one of those German wool blankets. They're fantastic. Carl Dahl, good friend of mine, good guy. And I've been around long enough that I've seen, things come and go, and like 15 years now, or longer. Goodness gracious, where did the time go? But many years ago, I was telling someone who's adjacent to our thing that like the only interesting conversations were happening on our side of the fence, and now you're seeing that in real time, and that's, I think, in large part due to things like what you've done over the last 10 years. With here at the Backlash, of course, I followed Vince for years, and Vince is a great guy, and got introduced to Cameron, and Cameron's stuff is fantastic. So I wish them the best. But the backlash has got to continue, because this sort of space is the only place where anything real can be discussed. Any real problem that we have in society is gonna bump up against the sacred cows of race egalitarianism, of the Jews are just white people with funny noses and funny hats and a weird religion, and that men and women are effectively the same. And of course, none of these are true, and that's where you run into the problems, right? Is if you treat here in the Northwest, right? Like we're going to replace a bunch of Swedes and Norwegian and English people with Bengalis, and they'll be just as civic minded, and they'll pick up the trash, and they'll be just as honest as and they'll be like, actually no. It turns out that's not actually the case, and in order to solve any real problem, you have to discuss it honestly first, and that's step one. So this program and others like it are vital to the future of whatever's next.
Well, thank you very much. Don't gas me up too much here. We still got a show to do. I can't let my ego get out of control here. But it is important, because it's like when you go around to different community forums, or like our local Republican Party or whatever, these people are not living in reality. They're not dealing with the actual issues. They're not properly assessing where we are, what time it is in this nation's history, and with the threats that we are currently facing, an economic crisis. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, which I've been told you are an absolute expert on. So I'm really looking forward to getting into that with you. But yeah, we need to be able to talk honestly and rationally about the situations that we have. That's why I'm really excited to talk on Wednesday with Mark from Rasmussen Reports, because we all live in our little echo chambers. We live on either Telegram or X or, God forbid, Facebook, and you're exposed to propaganda, but you are generally sandboxed. You're put inside of some sort of algorithmic filter where you are seeing messages that self-reinforce, whether you're pro-Israel, whether you're anti-Israel, pro-immigration or anti-immigration. We're all kind of sandboxed. And so being able to get an adequate diagnosis of where people actually are in the real world so that we can have real discussions about actual policy going forward, I think it's important. But anyway, let's talk a little bit about the housing market. There's been some news that has come out this week. Here's a tweet from Barchart. The U.S. housing market has reached its most unaffordable level in history, surpassing the 2006 bubble, which of course led to the 2008 financial collapse. Nick Gurley, he's over at Reventure Consulting. And he put out this chart just yesterday showing that buyer demand is basically the lowest that it's been since the 2008 financial collapse. So people are not buying homes.
Well, they can't afford them.
Right. They can't afford them. And of course, we've got, some ham-fisted attempts from the Trump administration working.
A 50-year mortgage, it'll be fantastic. Your grandchildren will be in debt for the house that you bought.
I know. And so they've introduced 50-year mortgages. They're working with the Pulte Group, Greg Pulte and all these people. They're some of the biggest home builders in America. And this is really all just insider scheming. This is not going to help anything. And there was also something that I saw, I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but there was some executive order that was sent through about whether or not BlackRock and Blackstone, these private equity firms, were allowed to buy private, housing, private residences. But it really just seems like all of this is being done to subsidize
Berkshire Hathaway.
Yeah,
Yep.
to subsidize Berkshire Hathaway and all of these companies that are, frankly, a little upside down in a lot of their trades. So can you give us like an overview of what you're seeing as far as the housing market, why we are where we are, and some of your thoughts on that?
Well, a couple things. That chart you just showed is a consequence of this. I just pinned it in the chat. In 1980, like the average home cost 3.5 times the median average income. Now it's up to like 5.8, 6, depending on if you want to live anywhere where there's like a job, you know, you're looking at least 6 times the annual income for your housing costs, right? And to fully understand this issue, you've got to kind of take the 20,000 foot view for a second, which I'll do it briefly and as least autistically as I can here. Housing as just a place to live is not actually a thing. People live in places, and those places have to be productive and return your investment, whether that's like at a port like New York City or Baltimore or San Francisco, or someplace with valuable resources like a mine or logging or something like that, or valuable fishing spots. People live in places, and then they build housing and communities around those resources or ports or who knows what, right? It depends on where you live. That is going to be the thing that brings people there. Like Chicago, for instance, is located at the shortest distance between the Great Lakes watershed and the Mississippi watershed. So in that one spot just outside of Chicago, the distance between the Great Lakes and Mississippi watershed's like less than a mile. So it's an ideal spot for transshipment of goods, or Buffalo, New York, right? Like transshipment over the falls, or anything like that. Philadelphia, right? It's right between the Delaware and the Siskiyou. Like I can never pronounce these names in the East Coast because I grew up in elsewhere. But people live in these places, and these places are productive or not, depending on the constraints and difficulties of where they're at. If they're really cold, if they're really far away, if the transportation is really expensive, which is why people tend to live on water, things like that. Okay. And housing, typically until the 20th century, was like built of local materials close to where you were. Everyone walked everywhere. Communities were relatively coherent. And in the 20th century, we've done all this stuff like turning homes, instead of places to live, around places where something useful was happening, whether that was agriculture or mining or transshipment of goods or what have you. Like there was an activity that was done in this place that the people who lived there did that generated money for them and a place, and a living. Well, once you divorce all that, then you're from Philly originally, right? Like what's the point of living in one of these Levitt towns? It's worth money because we're here. Well, we're here because we're here, because we're here.
Right.
What right? If you were in like an old Philadelphia row home, right, you could say, well, it's a 5-minute walk, and it was just originally Philadelphia was really designed to be this way, right? Like you're a 5-minute walk from a park, your parish is just down the street, parish school's just down the street. You can hop on a streetcar or walk to a job where you're doing something useful. And in the 20th century, we've divorced all these where people live or where people's homes are from where they live their lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until the 20th century, where you lived, where you worked, where you went to church, where you went to go to the park, or they were all relatively in the same spot. And industrial revolution, pollution, etc., whatever, that moved people out. But it wasn't until 1948 with Shelley v. Creamer that ended restrictive covenants that people really started living far, far away from everything. That's what really drove the suburbs. Because being a Philly guy, right, like you understand what happens when, Blessed Sacrament Parish is replaced by, the public housing project. And Bill Cosby and used to Custos for Rush, black guy economist, Walter Williams, right? They lived in the housing project that replaced Blessed Sacrament Parish. Like is Fat Albert and like an occasional guest host for Rush, like worth the total destruction of Blessed Sacrament Parish. But I'll leave that up for people actually from Philadelphia to decide. But
for those that don't know, Blessed Sacrament Parish in Philadelphia was like an all-black parish for African Americans. They had like one of the highest rates, I think, of students that went on to higher education to college. And after the Kennedy election, they destroyed that they destroyed all of the ethnic parishes in Philadelphia, and that's when white flight really began. They started moving people in, black people in, which caused the Germans, the Italians, the Irish to scatter and flee to the high hills. My parents were a part of that, the white flight in Philly. Sadly, I made a joke a couple of weeks ago. People were talking about, what about the movement? What about the movement? I'm like, you want to know what the movement is? The movement was white people moving from the cities to the suburbs. That's the movement. That's what happened.
And I've again been involved a long time. The biggest movement of people in the history of the world is in the 20th century. It's either, it's difficult to get numbers, right? It's either the Great Migration of blacks from the South to the industrial North during both World Wars. It's potentially the internal movement of Germans after the Second World War, the partition of India, or I think it's probably actually the white flight from the suburbs after the riots in the 60s. I think that's probably the single greatest movement of human beings. But of course, you can't honestly analyze that, because to do so would be to ask questions, and the federal government invents this 30-year mortgage, and Robert Moses, there's a great biography of him by Robert Caro, the power broker. Robert Moses was everything. He was the director of public parks, and he was essentially the man who, from a planning perspective, from a government perspective, invented the suburbs. And Levitt and Sons built the suburban home, and Victor Gruen invented the shopping mall as an ersatz, neighborhood high street. And you get precisely no points for figuring out what those three guys all have in common, and it's not that they're all in the same Rotary Club. And what that did, right, was turn housing, instead of like a thing that paid you back for being there, right? If you were in Philadelphia in like 1920 and you had like a row house, right, that your family lived on the top floor and you rented out the bottom floor, like it paid you to be there, just like every other place in history. If it didn't pay you to be there, you left, because why just lose money to be in this one spot over time? Well, the 30-year mortgage shifted that burden of like who's making money to the bank. And most of the time, right, like your bank would be like a local bank who was aware of the local housing market, or a credit union or something like that. And they generally want stability, right? Because wild swings in house prices mean that they go under. That's what the whole savings and loans crisis was in the 80s, was all these savings and loan type banks had issued mortgages at relatively low rates, and then the rates spike up, and all of a sudden they're underwater because they're getting money at 4%, and they're paying out money at 8 or 9. Like they're in trouble, and it doesn't need to be that big a swing for them to start having problems. And nowadays, right, like we made housing a financial product with the invention of the 30-year mortgage, but now, because everything with financialization has been a thing even in the 21st century, like now we bundle these mortgages, and the local banks or the local credit unions that would, like Joe Blow by, buying a house down the way, right? It would be his neighbors, his community that would be like, okay, yeah, well, Joe, and he's employed at XYZ widget factory, and he's got a good job, and he'll pay us back over the 30 years. This is a good investment. To bundling this stuff, and then it's Berkshire Hathaway and BlackRock, Blackstone, and all these other brick Wall Street things. Well, their interest isn't like, oh, well, we're local credit union, working stiff local credit union, and we want to make our 3% and stay in business. They want, like if it goes up double, right? If housing prices double the way they have in the last 10 years, then why are we not capturing that? They want to make money. Mm-hmm. They want to make lots of money. And so they're trying to buy all these single family homes so that instead of getting locked into a 30-year mortgage at say 5% and making your, $1,000 payment every month on your home where someone lives, they can be like, well, the value's gone up 20%. We're going to raise the rents every year. Right. So, and unless you address, the financialization of the economy and who benefits as per the Epstein files, right? Like this is just what they do to control society. Then you can't talk about it. Then you can't honestly address it. And unless you address the Shelley v. Kramer and the Civil Rights Act and all of that, you can't address like, why did everyone leave? Why do we have to rebuild the same neighborhood everywhere every 10 years or every 15 years? The political arrangement we have right now is that, your parents left Philadelphia and like rebuilt Philadelphia in Bucks County. Right.
Yep.
They had to build new grocery stores and new shopping malls and new homes and new schools and new everything to in suburban Philadelphia. And then those places get bad, and then they have to do it again, and then do it again. It's like, well, no wonder everyone's poor, because they've had no ability to maintain or accumulate capital, because every 10 or 15 years they got to move 2 exits down the highway further and rebuild everything that they just left. So they just spent a ton of money building homes, building a new gas station, building a new school, building a new everything. And then they got to abandon that because, a bunch of El Salvadorans shirted up and started, Puerto Ricans, and started playing reggaeton at 3 a.m. and everyone's like, this is impossible.
Yeah.
We can't live here. Our kids aren't safe. Well, that's what happens. That's the plan.
Now, I was going to say, you mentioned how after World War II, I guess there was, I think it was a combination of things with the Civil Rights Act, but basically like the abolition of covenant communities, where essentially like people of ethnic groups could, keep it as like an ethnic block. That kind of got one-shotted with the Civil Rights Act, with the repeal of some of these things. And what we're seeing today is groups like Arvol and Return to the Land. They're currently, I guess, getting sued right now. But they're trying to create like an intentional community is what they're calling it. Do you think that's like a potential solution to some of these issues for the housing crisis?
Absolutely. Well, things like that are the future. And notice that like when Black Americans like are going to build Fredonia or whatever in Georgia, like no one says a word. It's like, go ahead, do it. I mean, of course it's dismal and like failure, right? Mm. But Arvol's being sued because the second white people decide that they're not going to play the game anymore and they're going to collectivize, like the entire point of the post-war political project is to be like right-wing and white is illegal. And the more like of the white Christian conservative or illiberal, like more of those boxes you check, the more illegal it is for you to act in your own self-interest. So, you and I talking is practically legal because we're both, Christo-fascist, hetero patriarchalist, retrograde, whatever, like you and I tick all the boxes, right?
True. And so do a lot of the viewers.
Well, and that's good, right? Like that's, and effectively, right? the way out is projects like what Arvel's doing, and there are numerous other attempts at something like this elsewhere. And I won't talk about them for fear of I don't want to shine attention on these people, because that's just what the enemy is doing, is like monitoring and stuff like this, and like trying to stop people from hit pieces in the local media and hit pieces in lawsuits and all that other stuff. It's just, well, why? All right, if Indians can have reservations, why can't we have white people reserves? What's wrong with Iranian? Like, is it just because people don't want to live around people who are dangerous and unknown to them and don't share their religious values, like there's if you put a bunch of like Sicilians and Swedes in close proximity, there'd be a bunch of conflicts, and they're both Europeans. Like, you could take a bunch of Catholic Norwegians and a bunch of Catholic Italians, Catholic Sicilians, and they'd have different feast days and different temperaments and different preferences and different, there'd be, and these are, white Europeans. Or you could take, Catholic Ukrainians and Catholic Portuguese, and they'd have some stuff in common, but there'd be conflicts.
Right.
And we're supposed to pretend that like someone from like the Kalahari Desert, like a Kalahari Bushman and like a Korean are going to just like get along and have everything in common because like liberalism says so. It's ridiculous.
Right. Now, what can be done at like an individual or like a household level? I don't know if buying a house right now is the smartest thing in the world. Like I said, we looked at some of these charts showing how ridiculously inflated the housing market is, and it sounds like Donald Trump is obviously not going to be doing anything to correct that. He put out a statement a couple of weeks ago saying that they weren't going to, people feel rich for the first time in their lives, and we're not going to do anything about that. But then 20 and 30-year-olds, people that are trying to start families, they're not going to go out and buy $1 million home with a 50-year mortgage, right? Like, with what money?
Yeah, right. Well, inflation being worse, and it was like a buck and egg there for a little while. Like, how are you supposed to save money? Like, oh, you're spending too much money on rotisserie chicken, so you can't afford a house. Like, what? Right? Like, this is insane. The number one thing you can do, and I've advised this for years, is, whether it's a local active club, Patriot Front, different solidarist groups of white people, your traditional Latin mass community, people who know what time it is. Okay. Everyone else on earth collectivizes against your interests. Mexicans live 20 guys to a house built for 10 or built for 5 people, right? Indian guys will, work from home in like quarters that look like the naval birthing stations because they're hot swapping, cots where they'll build bunk beds where there's 4 on each wall, and eight guys are sleeping, and they're doing 2 shifts so that one guy's doing tech support from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and then he swaps bunks with the guy who's doing from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. or whatever, and they'll collectivize. Now, obviously, the legality issues, consult your local attorney, etc., because effectively, the U.S. government has made it illegal for white people to collectivize. If you could do so maybe on religious grounds, I don't know. But if you do have a group of guys that know what time it is, just for example, all right, you go to Home Depot, and one of those pre-built shed type things is, for ease of numbers, let's say $10,000. Okay. You get 5 guys together. That's $2,000 a piece. And I'm well aware that $2,000 is a lot of money for people with kids. But let's say that the state's paying your wife, you enroll in a program and you get $2,500 to homeschool your kids. Well, you take that $2,500 and you pool that for everybody, and all of a sudden you've got, St. Simon of Trent's Academy for Good Boys who know what time it is. And that shed go from being like it's paid off, and maybe during the day it's St. Simon of Trent's Academy for Good Boys who know what time it is, and at night it's the library full of books from Antelope Hill Publishing, where the bros meet to discuss like what's our next move, what are we going to do. Maybe you collectively buy a set of free weights, and so you don't have to pay for a gym. Find little things that like pay you back. All right. Build an AD. If you have a house, right? Build a mother-in-law apartment, and like your bro that just got married that can't afford like a big house, like rent it to him for, $800 a month so that, so that he has a place to live that he can afford.
I think I think
there's no way out of this that doesn't involve us working together, and that's the hardest part.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And there's something else to be said about this, and maybe I'll get a guest on at some point to talk about this. But it's rebuilding social fabric. Creating fraternal networks of other people in your local area. It's so helpful, not only for this housing situation, but also for jobs. The way that the government has kind of functioned, they have stepped in to take over these types of like charitable roles that were traditionally filled by churches. Churches used to be the ones that would feed the poor, shelter the needy, and all of this kind of stuff.
Take care of the stick, yep.
And now that has all switched to the government. It's Section 8 housing, it's food stamps. And for the most part, white people have been either excluded from it or maybe a little too proud, I think, to kind of capitalize on some of these programs. And I think you're right. Like in places like Idaho, where I live, I know we just passed a bunch of child tax credits for schooling that allows kids for the first time, I think, to get government subsidies to go to private sectarian schools. So that means that, we can actually get government money to send your kids to a Catholic or an Orthodox or, a Lutheran, Presbyterian, whatever, school. Whereas in the past, basically the only route available was public schools. And a lot of this stuff is also now starting to hit homeschooling as well, where you're able to get these types of tax credits for homeschooling. So if you've got a big, group of kids, you get like 4 families together, and if you're not contracepting and if you're having kids, you could have like...
That's 20 people.
That's 20 kids. Yeah, absolutely. And, at $1,000 or $2,500 a kid in these types of subsidies, that can go a long way. Buying curriculum, buying computers, buying the things necessary to educate your kids. And there's a lot of really good homeschool programs now too.
Yes, of course. And if you're listening to this program, dear listener, unless you have like a known to you to be solid religious school where the pastor and the teachers and the whole administration, and that they're solid, you cannot send your children to public schools. You cannot send your children to it's the Catholic school down the street. Like, you cannot send your children. No. It's not responsible as a parent. Like, you just can't do it.
No.
And it's unfortunate to say that, but that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I think people have kind of forgotten, with education, education is the primary role of the parents. It is not the primary role of the church. It is not the primary role of the state. It's the parents' job to educate kids, period. For the purposes, schools came out of collectivization. It came out because groups of people were like, hey, I'm not that good at teaching, but you are. You're good at teaching your kids. Can you teach mine? and that's how a lot of this stuff kind of came about in the first place. But yeah, it's going to take a lot. Now, what do you think about? There's been some interesting stuff. There's a chart here I'm going to put on the screen. Since COVID, we've seen a lot of internal mass migration, which has been pretty severe, especially in places like Idaho, Texas, Arizona. On this chart here, this is from Reventure Consulting, states that are red had a positive increase in population, and states that are blue had a decrease in population. And, big surprise, it's all of these liberal states, Massachusetts, New York, California, Colorado, Illinois, Louisiana, and people are fleeing to states like Arizona, Texas, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Idaho. We've definitely been feeling it up here.
That's what the Greater Idaho Project needs to succeed, just so there's more room in Idaho.
Well, see, I would argue. Let me see if I can pull up the tweet. So there is the Greater Idaho Project, right? And that is the idea that like Eastern Oregon and some of Washington would get annexed by Idaho. But, I think that is honestly a play to get at Idaho's natural resources. There was a map. I don't have it. Let me see. State of Lincoln. Probably misspelling it. Well, it's not there. I can't get it. But anyway, there was the state of Lincoln, which was proposed, and I like that a lot better. State of Lincoln. Let me see if it pops up. Yeah, here it is. This was a proposed northwestern state. I like this idea a lot better. We can let the Mormons and the Jews keep southern and eastern Idaho. But, taking out to Ellensburg, this is a greater Idaho that I could get behind. The problem is down here, we have the port of Lewiston, which goes all the way out to Portland, and it would make the extraction of Idaho's natural resources a lot easier. And so that's why I'm kind of skeptical of the official Greater Idaho Project. But the idea of perhaps cutting the state in half, having a North and South Idaho, and then expanding west to the Cascade Mountains, not to LARP too much, but I think that might be a little bit better.
Well, whatever. I mean, there's obviously, with a bunch of strongly opinionated, disagreeable people, there's going to be like differences of opinion, shall we say. And whether that's like Western Virginia states, not West Virginia, but Western Virginia states, like looking at the disaster that is the recent election there and being like, forget this, we're just going to join West Virginia, or the parts of Maryland that are in Western Maryland being like, this is ridiculous. We're out. We don't want to be shackled to Baltimore anymore. Right. People have to understand that like this present system is not going to survive. Okay. If Dave, pull the map of who's moving where back again, again, if you would, please.
Yes.
Okay. So California, New Jersey, New York, and Illinois are all like bankrupt as states, right? They have massive pension obligations. They have declining tax revenues, declining population. They have Gini coefficients that are like third world, which is to say that like they have a lot of very rich people and a lot of very poor people, right? And the rich people will just leave, which is what the rich people in California and New York are doing, right? Donald Trump being, the example of like he was a rich guy from New York who was like, forget this, I'm just gonna move to Florida, right? Like, and these state and local governments, their taxes are often based off of like property taxes. Their school taxes are paid for by property taxes. They're having this problem of like, well, you created this situation where people can't live here anymore, and then people don't live here. So now what are you going to do? Like and not to say that Texas is great, because Texas has a massive like fraud problem. To listen to my friend Mike Ferris, Coffee and a Mike, he's talked about this. What they're doing is fraudulently evaluating homes at more than what they're worth for tax purposes, or so if they can't increase the mill rate, they'll increase the supposed proper value of the property so as to meet their tax obligations. And every big city in Texas and other school districts has massive liabilities in the future, right? The whole boomer pension crisis is a thing. The unfunded liabilities. That's the case everywhere, not just the deep blue states there that are losing folks. The difference is that in Texas, there's actually a possibility of maybe fixing it because there's not, you're not run by insane people like Hochul or Newsom or Washington and Oregon. Just heartbreaking. The people who run these states they're insane. Yeah. I mean, they're absolutely crazy. That's why Idaho has seen this massive explosion in people, and why Bozeman is now like Los Angeles, is because all these people moved. And of course, right, in a democracy, right, you can't tell someone who just moved from Los Angeles to Coeur d'Alene with their funny money from California, where their home was worth, $1.2 million for a postage stamp. And then they come to North Idaho and they're like, I have $1.2 million. Let me jack up housing prices here. Right? Like someone like you or me can't be like, okay, welcome, but you realize you're a fool and you make bad decisions and you should stop having opinions, right? Like, they're like, well, but we did it better in California. And like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong and you don't know things.
To defend the Californians a little bit, anyway, I can't speak for southern Idaho, but in northern Idaho, for sure, it seems like a lot of the people that have moved up here, Vince James is one of them. They came from Orange County. They came from Huntington Beach area. And if you know anything, I'm sure you do, Huntington Beach is like,
oh yeah, no, absolutely.
Massive stronghold for nationalist thought in California. A lot of those people in Orange County. I mean, Orange County for the longest time was one of the most right-wing conservative areas in California.
People forget Nixon and Reagan came from California.
Yeah, it's true.
Right, and Huntington Beach is where the Ram guys were when they got, that there were, and this is why the whole libertarian idea of like, but state power is immoral. If we use state power, the bad guys are like, your power is being used against you, whether you like it or not, like Aragorn me. Like, this is not a situation where, and of course the establishment Republicans in places like Montana and Idaho and, Wyoming are like, well, we can't actually win. That would be immoral. Like,
yeah,
would make us, which was maddening, but that's the way, and that's our job is to like, just beat these people intellectually till they, are in a corner crying and stop saying stupid stuff like, actually winning would be wrong.
Right?
But yes.
No, it's amazing to see what's going on in Idaho. And I really wish that more people would do this. But, we've kind of, not to speak on behalf of all people here in Idaho, because I obviously don't, but there has been like a large contingent of people that live up here that they get it. There's a new PAC that's out called Secure Idaho. They're working on this illegal immigration stuff because we essentially have slave labor here in Idaho.
Of course, yeah. You have slave labor everywhere. Like, what's the two counties in Washington that are majority Mexican? That back in the 70s they were all white teenagers picking apples, and now I forget. There's two counties in Washington State that are majority Mexican because they're effectively Mexican slave labor.
Yep, and a lot of that's happening in Idaho. And what's crazy is that it's like some of the legislators, specifically in southeastern Idaho, people like Stephanie Mickelson, who owns a dairy farm and has a bunch of illegal slave labor working for her. And this was one of the things, I think I have it bookmarked. One of our legislators, Brian Lenny, just tweeted this out today. How we are very rapidly coming with robots and AI, we're not going to need these people. We're going to have robots picking the fruit. We're going to have machines doing a lot of this stuff that is currently being done by slave labor. And I think it's incumbent on some of these state legislatures to start enacting laws, start enforcing the law, start making it hurt for these people like Chobani or the dairy industry, the big potato, big ag. A lot of these people.
The guy who killed Molly Tibbetts, he was living on the farm of the brother of the state chair of the Republican Party in Iowa.
Jeez.
Right? I can't. Yeah. Yeah.
When was this?
Oh, this was many years ago, but the farm he was working on was owned by a family member of the state party Republican chairman or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone else can collectivize. What is it? 23% of Mexicans are living in America. Something like 25% of Guatemala's GDP is remittances from Americans or America. Guatemalans living in America. You, white American taxpayer, are supposed to just do it on your own. You're supposed to pay for your own health care and pay for your own children's education because you can't use your local public school because your kids will get stabbed. And you're supposed to pay your own freight and pay your own housing costs and pay everything. And you can't get together with five guys and build something yourself because that's Nazism. That's socialism. Well, everyone else in the world is living at your expense. Taxation is theft when the whole point of the tax system is to take money from white Christian fathers and give it to non-white, non-Christian foreigners.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right.
No, 100%. And something that we've talked about on the show a lot, I know when Vince was here too, is if we actually started deporting people in a very serious way, housing prices would drop dramatically.
Yes.
Because a lot of these houses are owned by slumlords. They're owned, and renting them out to these foreigners. So not only are they driving down wages of white working class Americans, they're also driving up housing costs, which is making it impossible for young people to get married and have kids. So this is one of the reasons why illegal immigration needs to be combated rigorously.
Okay, well, your kids are still relatively young, right, Vince? Okay, so my kids are getting to the point where I think maybe 10 years older than you are, and so my kids are not adults yet, but they're getting there. Do you want to send your daughters, your precious little girls, to go live around a bunch of Pajeets?
Nope.
Right? You can't do that. As a responsible dad, you cannot be like, okay, it's okay, honey, you can go live around the rapey Mexicans or the rapey Pajeets or the rapey Negroes and go to college or and go get a job and maybe discern a vocation or whatever, or maybe meet somebody. You can't do that. Well, okay, if all these people are gone, not only is housing prices down, but the normal day-to-day life stuff of okay, well, how do you meet people? Well, there's no such thing as there's a thing called a third space, right?
Right.
Where it's not work, it's not home, it's someplace like restaurants or parks or where people go to meet people, like cafes, anything, right? Well, there's no third spaces in America that you don't have to pay for. That when you're young and you have no money, how do you meet people? You can't just go to the park because at the park there's going to be schizophrenic, homeless, drug addict Negroes that are going to threaten to stab you, and they might stab you. Very often they will stab you, or drunk Mexican guys who just fell asleep on the bench and they wake up and they might be hostile and they're covered in the I kill people tattoos on their forehead, and you can't go there. Whereas in a safe, non-insane, white society, you could just go to the park and be safe.
Right.
And maybe, you do the 101 Dalmatians meet cute thing where you actually like run into people that and maybe you make friends or meet a potential spouse or just enjoy life without having to pay for it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No.
and everything in America today, if you're a white person, costs money. Sure, we don't have safe public parks with playground equipment anymore because homeless crazy people will sleep in the slide. But you can pay to go to private bouncy house place, and well, okay, but what if I don't have any money because I have 7 kids?
Right.
Because I did what the church taught. Like, okay, so this is actually a when someone like Supich, who I really don't like for a lot of reasons, says like, oh, we got to care about the illegal immigrants. Says, well, Eminence, what about all the people from Chicago who've been driven from their homes or can't use the park or can't use public schools and are paying taxes and are dealing with the imposition of these massive costs that you have imposed because you're a gay traitor. Let's be honest about Supich. He's a gay traitor. He hates the pro-life movement. When he was Bishop of Spokane, he locked the pro-life club out of the church. Ask me how I know. Like this is not a guy that we can right and until and this is why like something like the backlash is so important is because you can't just solve any one aspect of the problem, right? You have to look at the religious side and be like, oh yeah, well, whatever. He might be wearing a red hat, but I'm just going to ignore Blaise Supich because he's not an honest broker. He's not acting in good faith. He's literally just like a gay race communist who's using his position to advance his political agenda. He doesn't actually believe anything about Christianity or Catholicism or trying to get help me get my kids to heaven.
Right.
Like he does not care about that at all.
No. Most of them don't. I mean, like all of
these, obviously,
all of these bishops, including our own. I'm going to get excommunicated for this probably, but I mean, we've got Bishop Christensen down in Boise. He hasn't made an apostolic visit to North Idaho since I've lived here. Right? He has not visited the flock up here. He has no idea what's going on. And he's mired in hearings and trials because he's bringing in third world priests from Haiti that have been going around raping 17-year-olds. Like, hello? Can we teach the faith? Can we do something for your flock that's actually here? No, he's busy. Let me see if I can I'll pull it up. Boise priest rape. Yeah, here it is. This is from February 3rd. Nampa priest pleads guilty to assaulting teen. And by the way, Nampa is one of the largest Mexican populations in the state of Idaho. I think over 30% of Nampa, Idaho is Mexican. And a lot of them are illegal.
When I was a child, a million years ago, not that long ago, it was white Mormons in Nampa.
Yeah. Not anymore. Anymore.
Right. Right. Well, and again, like if we're dealing with this housing issue of like, well, okay, a bunch of these other people came here. They play ranchero music at 3 a.m. There's 10 people living in a house built for 4 people. The sewers, there's eight different cars that are in various states of repair, running and not, parked on the lawn. They don't pick up their trash. They're constantly playing ranchero music at 3 a.m. And if I complain, I'm a racist and a bigot, and the bishop will tell me, oh, you need to be more open to our brothers and sisters. Well, if I said, hey, guys, hey, Patriot Front guys, like I built this barrack-style housing, thing, and for all you guys that are like single and want to like just live cheap. Here you go. Well, all of a sudden that's a neo-Nazi compound. Right? And the federal government's going to like burn it down and kill us all. If I just wanted to provide cheap housing to people and make a little bit of money on the side, and for young single guys that were aware of things and trying to save money. Like if I said, hey, look, man, you can live here for a few months. It's going to be barrack style housing. It's not going to be anything great, but it'll be cheap and you can live here. Right. That's the biggest problem right now is efforts like Return to the Land. Everyone understands housing is screwed, right? Like the problem is not enough people are in a position to understand the problem. And the problems are that we can't discriminate about who lives there. So you can't choose your neighbors. So you can't deal with like, well, what if, cousin Pookie with the gang associations shows up at his cousin's house at 2 a.m, which happens in those communities. What if the ranchero music at 3 a.m. is a little obnoxious, which it is? What if, the immigrants just don't dispose of trash the way they're supposed to, which they don't? Well, how are you supposed to live? Like, you have to leave. What if there's Sikh truck drivers who can't read English and are driving truck in sandals? Crashing multiple ton vehicles on the highway because they don't know what they're doing because they got a CDL from a fly-by-night place that was registered in overnight. And you can't address these issues honestly. And that's what the backlash does, I think, very well is without swearing. Although that's very tempting sometimes. Like, you're honest about this stuff, and that's the issue that needs to be discussed. I mean, I could discuss all day the structural problems with why suburbs are a problem, and that they inherently don't pay people back, and how much pipe did you need to build to house 10 people versus in a traditional Philadelphia neighborhood versus now in Bucks County, and it costs more pipe and it costs more road and it costs more this and it costs more that. And that's all an issue. But at the heart of that issue is like, why can't I live in Kensington? Why can't I live in Kensington and walk down the street to a church that my kids can go to where they're going to get the real mass and they're going to get the real faith and they're going to go to a school full of their friends and neighbors, and maybe they'll meet little Susie next door in the 3rd grade and they'll just be friends and then date and then get married. Why can't that happen? Well, because look at Kensington now. For those of you who don't know, Kensington is the worst neighborhood in Philadelphia. There's drug addicts all over the place. Everyone's got that fent bend where they're half bent over zombies. And it's until you can honestly address that problem, like it's a problem of immigration, it's a problem of drugs, it's a problem of race, it's a problem of neoliberalism, of capitalism, of Judaism. Like, the Sackler family, which available at Antelope Hill Publishing. My friend Trey Garrison wrote a book called Opiates for the Masses. You need to read it if the opiate crisis has affected your life. That's why you can't live in Kensington anymore.
Yeah, I remember one time, the last time that I went to Philly to visit. This is just some like random B-roll of Philadelphia, but the last time that I went to Philly to visit, we went to what used to be Little Italy. There's like one Italian store left, and 1 block away, there was like a shanty town with like people selling stolen bikes and wigs under like tarps that resembled something I would see in like Ecuador. I mean, it's a 3rd world country. Philadelphia is anymore, and it didn't used to be. That wasn't that way, when my parents were born. But
it wasn't that way when you were a kid.
No,
but it is now.
Yeah, and something that I also wanted to kind of bring up. I think we've kind of hinted at it, but let's this is the backlash. Let's be very fucking blunt. Pardon my French. I swore. William Levitt is widely credited as the father of modern American suburbia for developing mass-produced affordable housing communities known as Levitt towns in the late 40s and 50s. Here's the fun part. William Levitt Born in 1907 to a Jewish family in Brooklyn. So,
Look up Robert Moses.
like, I hate to say it's every single time, but it really is. Suburbia was designed in a way that would atomize people and separate people from one another. People that, in Europe, like if you ever have a chance to visit Europe,
oh, it's awesome.
You go see the cities and how people live together, and it's fairly close quarters. They have very built up urban centers where everybody knows their neighbor. You can walk to mass, you can walk to work, and that all got traded out after the invention of the car, after the invention of suburbia. Anyway, who you wanted me to look up? Was it Robert Moses?
Robert Moses. He's the government official that effectively made car-based Levitt towns possible.
Let's take a look here. There it is. Moses
now look
was
up
born
Victor Gruen.
in New Haven, Connecticut, to German Jewish parents. Wonderful.
Now look up Victor Gruen.
Victor Bruin?
Gruen. Gruen.
Okay, let's see. Victor Gruen.
He invented the shopping mall. He's an architect.
Middle-class Jewish family in Vienna. There it is. That's incredible. He did urban revitalization proposals described in his writings, master plans such as Fort Worth, Texas, Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Fresno, California. The first outdoor pedestrian mall in the United States, the Kalamazoo Mall. Let's take a look. Okay. Yeah, well, I hate to keep, shilling for Idaho so much, but there were these malls, right? Like you remember all these Sears malls that would pop up all over the place. Well, in most of the country, those malls have gone completely defunct. They're turning into either healthcare, office space, storage space, training areas, or Amazon shipping and delivery facilities. That's what a lot of these old malls have been turned into. And here in Coeur d'Alene, anyway, when our mall went defunct, God bless them, the guys that own Black Sheep Sporting Goods, they bought the mall and turned the entire mall into one giant gun store. It's unbelievable. If you ever have
awesome.
Yeah, if you ever have a chance to come up, because it's like instead of it having being populated with Payless shoes and Macy's and all of these different things, it's like they just here's the optics store, here's the boot store, here's the kayak store, here's the fishing rod store, here's the gun shop, and so you go in the mall and it's just all owned by one thing, and they've successfully revitalized it. Parking lot is always full. People are constantly, there patronizing that business, which is great. But, and I think a lot of this stuff, a lot of the solution to these problems, not to black pill too much, but it comes down to localism. It comes down to building networks in your area with elected officials, getting people elected to office, and building businesses, building fraternal networks that can actually support your community.
Right. Well, what you need, right? The federal government can say, oh, that's illegal all day long. If they don't have the cooperation of your local sheriff, they're going to have a really hard time making, oh, that's a neo-Nazi compound. Well, is it a neo-Nazi compound, or is it just the sheriff's buddy Dave who has a small farm and guys who are just getting started out live, in a barrack style farmhand house that they put up so that young guys who were just out of college can live cheap while they save some money, find a girlfriend. And then when they actually have a girlfriend and get married, they can move out and actually not have paid every cent they own in rent for the last 5 years.
Right. And there's something else too that I think needs to be kind of destigmatized, especially in our circles. And that is you live in your parents' basement. Honestly, I had a chance to live with my parents after college, and it gave me the opportunity to save money. to buy
Yes.
a car, and to get up on my feet in a way that if you kind of conform to societal pressures and it's like, oh no, you have to get your own apartment, you have to move out, you don't want to be
Not only
a basement dweller
is
with your
that true,
parents.
but like you're familiar with the Little House books, right? The Little House on the Prairie, Little House in the Big Woods, all that.
Yeah.
They're very well written and they're great kids books. But effectively, what those stories are about is like Thomas Jefferson's insane liberal ideas playing out across the landscape in causing like poverty and immiserating this one family because they can never take advantage of division of labor. So they're constantly Pa, has to constantly be the guy who's the blacksmith and the farmer and the cooper and the this and the that because there's just his family in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, well, if he lived in like a real Catholic village, then he could just be the farmer and he could feed people. And the guy who was the cooper and the guy who was the blacksmith and the guy who was the leather worker could like trade with him for like potatoes. And then they could make a living.
Yep.
Being the leather worker or the blacksmith for, this little town. And basically, I mean, from Chicago all the way to Vladivostok, white people lived in villages and then, towns and then cities and then, big cities. And you see it in like the ecclesiastical organization of the church, right? You have, right. You have the Cardinal Archbishop of Philadelphia because that's the megalopolis, the big city. And then you have like bishops of Pittsburgh and Harrisburg and Scranton or whatever. And then you have, towns, wherever those are, where there's a Catholic school and maybe a Monsignor and a village priest. And then maybe you have a little small town where there's like mass once a month because the priest lives, the town over. And, you can either come to him or once a month he makes it out to your little, hamlet in the middle of nowhere. Well, call me crazy, but if like this model worked from, Far Eastern Russia, the Russian Far East, all the way to Chicago, who are we in the Western United States? Be like, what would be better? Spending 5 hours a day in the car on Sundays trying to get to an actual mass. Like, why can't we just have like a Catholic neighborhood with a Catholic mass where everyone walks to church? And then, why is everyone in Europe like way skinnier than in America? Well, first of all, because they don't have a bunch of like weird stuff in their food. I had a hotel, right? Non-GMO skincare products. Valentine's Day just passed, but there's always next year. So, gentlemen, for your ladies, that kind of stuff. But also, like, if you're walking, you get up in the morning, you go to work. You go to work. You walk half a mile. You get on the train. You get off at your stop. You walk a quarter mile to work. At lunchtime, you walk a quarter mile back. Take the train, half a mile to home. Have lunch with your family. Do the same. And then do the same again. You just walk 3 miles during the course of your day. That all that walking was a productive walk.
Mm-hmm.
You were going places, doing things. So you weren't just going for a walk, go for a walk, but you walked 3 miles. So you don't you can have a huge pasta lunch and you burn it off because you're walking everywhere.
Right. Yeah.
And in America, right, like every drive-through and fast food, because we're always stuck in the car, and we're always stuck in the car because we can't just be like, actually, it's not like inherently immoral to be like, I don't want to live around the people who are in Kensington, like prostitutes and crack addicts and crazy people, and actually, the state's job is to protect like normal, decent people from those people. That's the whole point of a state, is to provide order and safety. So, like, don't at me with that stuff.
Haven't had that for a long time.
Right. Well, not in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
And that's because, right, the Victor Gruen people, Robert Moses people, like took over a government, occupied it, and like destroyed. You and I both have had our differences with Dr. Jones over the years, but Slaughter of Cities is a brilliant book And effectively what the story of that is that like apostate liberals and Jews destroyed Catholic America. And they did it and because we Catholics had our neighborhoods in Seattle and Buffalo and New York and Philadelphia and Baltimore and like everywhere. There was a Catholic neighborhood where people lived the way people had always lived for thousands of years. And then those places were destroyed. It's not even a question of like, oh, well, this just kind of, no. Like that's on purpose. The purpose of a system is what it does to, quote the maxim that's been floating around for the last couple of years. Like, well, if the system like disempowers white people and destroys their ability to make a living and prevents them from organizing politically and says that they have to pay for everything from everyone else and they, like everyone else gets a free ride off of them and they have to pay for everything themselves. Like, what's the alternative but to rebel against that system? And that's where we're at right now. And so, like, if you're a young guy listening to this, like, you're way better off. Maybe you could live with your folks. Maybe you need to get like 3 or 4 roommates that don't know what time it is and consciously choose to collectivize.
Yep.
And if one of your, if your pastor says, oh, well, that's, ignore him.
Yep. Yeah, no,
because
you got to ignore these people that would say, yeah, they're just not living in reality.
Candlelight Christian Fellowship. If those people say you're doing something wrong, you're probably doing something right.
Yeah, very true. And just in a kind of closing thought about this housing crisis, the real way to solve this stuff is to get people elected to your local planning and zoning boards and make things like Section 8 housing illegal. Make
that's
these
exactly right.
Make these suburbs illegal. You can do that all through planning and zoning. So voting for president, that is not going to help. Obviously, what does it say about insanity? Trying the same thing over and over again and getting the same result, but expecting different results. That's the definition of insanity. So the solution, I know I get a lot of pushback from people that watch, like, oh, Dave just wants us to vote harder. Well, I want you to vote in your local elections. I want you to vote for people that will, go on planning and zoning and say, hey, you know what? This isn't working. These suburbs, these tract homes that are built with shit quality, that fall apart. They're made out of, sawdust lumber. We're done with that. We're not going to approve any more of those projects. And when something like that ages out, you're going to have to replace it with something better, something that provides for because this is like one of the other things with planning and zoning that I always thought was so stupid, and especially about the suburbs, is that it separates where you work from where you live. Like if you live in a suburb, you have to have a car so that you can go to the store and buy laundry detergent or whatever. That's not how it used to be. In the cities, you'd be able to walk down to the corner store, you get your groceries, get your detergent, whatever, and you could walk home. Not to be like, the old man shaking a fist in the air at the Industrial Revolution and its consequences. But this is all within the competency of a city council or a planning and zoning committee, to be able to consciously choose, hey, we don't like the kind of society that these structures, that this architecture, that these ways of social engineering, we don't like it. It's not working.
Well, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
To tie in, and then I know we got to wrap here soon. Like, the reason everything looks plastic and ugly and the houses are falling apart and they're put together poorly of poor materials by Mexicans who do a bad job is why invest in a place that is going to fall apart in 20 years? That's not going to exist. The pension obligations and the taxes and stuff. Things are so bad in these places in terms of the long-term fiscal outlook that in order to actually pay for what you're using, you'd have to like 5 to 10x the annual property tax bill in a lot of these places. So is anyone going to live in, Treasure State acres outside of Boise in the middle of a desert that only exists because they're draining the Snake River to water their lawns and keep the like that place is going to fall apart. Like if you ask people like, hey, instead of $1,000 a year to pay for school and property taxes, or $1,500, we're going to ask you for $15,000 a year.
Yep.
Right. No one would live in that place. Nobody.
And that's to say nothing about, I know down in Kuna, Idaho, they were Facebook was trying to put a data center in that basically would have drained all of the agricultural water because you need water to cool all the computers. I'm not really sure where that landed, but
so on top of that, right? Like, and so we're dealing with all this stuff that it's just not going to continue. And so the answer isn't like try and save the ship of national elections. Like, unfortunately, America is done nationally. It's just not possible to live with Californians and New Yorkers and right, all that. So you can build a lifeboat in your local area, and that starts with like, get one of our guys on the Planning and Zoning Commission and him having to start saying no to like, why are we approving another suburb that's just going to be a financial liability for us for the next 30 years until it falls apart.
Right.
And if you can't live with your folks, and you're listening to this, find local guys, whether it's your local active club or your local Latin Mass group of guys who know what time it is, and start doing things that like help you live your life. And that would be the only thing I would say is in the future. And if it doesn't have to be anything huge, you don't have to have like a compound or whatever. Like that's bad.
It's a bad word.
Not the best term to use given history, but no, wake me please, FBI. But if you can come up with a homeschool co-op that like reduces your costs and pays you to live there, do that. Yeah. If you can come up with a gym, a home gym that all your guys can work out at, instead of paying $200 or $110 a month for a gym, work out there with bros, and that'll save you money. Like, do group buys at Costco. Find a friend of yours who's a farmer, and like, if you tell him like, dude, we will buy 10 sides of beef from you every year, guaranteed. Pay him up front. Then he knows like he has enough revenue, and maybe your whole parish. If you have a base farmer who's a member of the parish, the whole parish should just get together and be like, we're gonna, like, if you have 100 head of cattle and you need 80 to break even, we're gonna buy 75 of those. Yeah. And then he knows that he only has to sell 5 head of cattle outside the parish to break even for the year. And then instead of this up and down and constant precarity the farmer is in all the time, if he just knows like, hey, my bros at church have half of my annual, or even if it was just a third, whatever it is, if he knows for a fact that he's taken care of, then a lot of this stuff starts to go away.
Yeah.
And our people need to realize that the system is inherently hostile and act accordingly. That would be my only piece of advice for folks out there.
Yeah.
And of course, listen to the Backlash for more information that you need to know.
Well, thank you so much for that. Please tell people where they can find you. You're one of the few guests that you're not on X. You don't have a website, but you are on Telegram. We have a link.
Gab.
We have a link below on Telegram. What's your Gab? I'll pull that up real quick.
At ingab.com/enlightdark, I think. I can throw it to you, but like, and I don't post there much, honestly, because I'm busier on Telegram. There you go.
No posts yet. You don't even post on it. What are you doing, man?
I need to be better about that.
Up your social media
I have posted there before, but no, but like that's go to the platforms that don't kick you off for not lying, I guess.
Right.
So Gab and Telegram and Rumble, which I have to say I vastly prefer Rumble to YouTube. So thank you for being on Rumble, because that's where I get my backlash at.
Nice.
So.
Well, thank you.
But yeah, and thank you for all your hard work over the many, many years. I know that you've been in this as long as I have, just about. And so.
Yeah. And so definitely, if you're watching, that's not it. This is it. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, you can go in the show notes and find Dark Enlightenment's Telegram and his podcast, The Fundamental Principle.
Which day was on a month ago?
Last month. So, yeah, very good stuff. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I've got a couple super chats that I'm going to read. No questions for you. But thank you so much for joining. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Awesome. That was great. Let's see here. We do have a couple of super chats that we need to get to. Get your last minute super chats in at thebacklash.net/super chat, or you can send it to Rumble Rants or on YouTube. Let's see here. We've got one from Tater Bugbear 1 who sent $10 on Rumble. Glad you're keeping the show going. Well, thank you. Yes, we are. And we've got a big lineup coming up this week. In case you missed it earlier, we've got Honest Pollster coming on. That's Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports. He's going to be coming on this Wednesday. Friday, we're going to be talking with Homath about women. And then on Monday, February 23rd, we've got Casey Putsch. March 2nd, Carl Dahl, author, will be coming on to talk a little bit about the Spanish Civil War. And, whether or not, are we looking at a civil war here in America? So we'll be talking with him about that. We've also got Jim White is going to be coming on the show. Jim White runs Northwest Liberty News up in Kalispell, Montana. And there's been a really big fight out there with their local credit union that's been racketeering, basically. And so he's going to be coming on the show at the end of February to talk a little bit about that situation. So, yep, keeping the show going. Thank you so much for coming. Musing Trucker sent $20. He said, excited to see how the show evolves. Do you think in the future you'll take audience call-ins to discuss topics on air? God bless. Yes, absolutely. That is definitely on the table. Either audience call-ins or just Twitter Spaces. We'll have to find a way to get all the technology to work together. I don't know if we could always get like a phone line and open that up and have people call. I think I can tether my phone to my audio thing. So we'll either do that or, perhaps Telegram. I'm working on getting a Telegram chat together for everybody that enjoys the show. So we might just be able to use Telegram to get your voices in here. But yes, lots of big plans for the show. Thank you for continuing to watch. Mars 5064 sent $9 on YouTube. Said, thanks for keeping the show together. Great guest. Learned a lot. Well, thanks. And APOC813 sent $20 on YouTube. Ave Maria, brother, keep up the good work. You were the guy who got me interested in politics again when you raised the rosary to Rob Smith. 07, sir. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, man, that was, holy shit, how many years ago was that? It was like 7 years ago now. Back when I confronted Rob Smith over at the Culture War thing with Charlie Kirk. Wow, it's been a wild ride, and it's not over yet, folks. We've got a lot more coming. So get your last minute super chats in if you want. If you have any other questions or anything else, I'm going to briefly talk about some of our sponsors, which we are very thankful for. Antelope Hill Publishing, which is fighting to keep history alive amidst a regime of anti-white censorship. They are equipping a new generation of dissidents with the information needed to fight the anti-white regime. Their varied catalog includes the newly updated and expanded third edition of Dr. Kevin MacDonald's Culture of Critique, the essential modern text on Jewish identity, Dr. Ricardo Duchesne's magnum opus, Greatness in Ruin, the definitive scholarly examination of European exceptionalism, as well as works by Kerry Bolton, Paul Kersey, and Josh Neal. Antelope Hill recently brought David Irving's iconic Nuremberg, The Last Battle back into print and have numerous translations of historical works from eras such as Fascist Italy, National Socialist Germany, Civil War Spain, all previously unavailable in English. There are also plenty of books on contemporary issues such as transgenderism, the opioid crisis, Christian nationalism, as well as history books, novels, and children's books. So whatever your interest is, you're bound to find books that you like at Antelope Hill, all professionally published and with sleek modern cover art. Help us and help our people by checking out companies that share our values and fight for our cause. Visit antelopehillpublishing.com and use promo code BACKLASH10. You'll get 10% off your order. And speaking of Backlash10, you can use that same promo code over at Above Time Coffee Roasters. They are the makers of some of the finest coffee I have ever drank in my life. I've got a cup of it actually right here. It's very good. The Nordic Blonde Roast is what I've been drinking. You can get all of their hand-roasted, small-batch, fair trade coffee at abovetimecoffee.com. And they've even got like a French press if you want to get fancy with your coffee, if you don't want to put it in a brewer. But please go to Above Time Coffee, use promo code BACKLASH10, you'll get 10% off. And like what we were talking about earlier with the housing crisis, there is a monetary crisis. We're in the midst of a great monetary reset. We are seeing the dollar quickly collapse and a revaluation into precious metals, things like gold and silver. And so our friends at atlasbullion.com/backlash are the best online bullion dealer that you could possibly go to. They've got gold and silver packages starting as low as $55 a month for silver, $200 a month for gold, and you can start stacking and saving in a form of money that cannot be debased by the federal government. So as the dollar continues to get weaker, your purchasing power will increase if you are saving in gold and silver. So please check out atlasbullion.com/backlash. And of course, Idaho Tallow Company, they make skincare without endocrine disruptors, no harsh chemicals, and no fake endocrine disrupting fragrances. You can shop their collection of soap, balm, lip balm, and soy-free candles at idahotallow.com, and orders over $100 shipped for free. And last but certainly not least is our friends at ODGG Supply. Things are getting crazy, and as things get crazy in these fourth turnings, social fabric obviously falls apart. You've got these Mexican gangbangers going around. You need to be able to defend yourself, defend your home, defend your family. And for that, anymore, you're going to need stuff like thermal optics and night vision. And so you can go to odggsupply.com and get loaded up on tactical gear that has all been tested in the field with our friends at ODGG Supply. They go on these rucks every couple of weeks where they test out new gear, and they're great. So if you use promo code BACKLASH25, you will get free shipping on all of your orders from odggsupply.com. Make sure that you follow them on X at PNW Gorilla. You will see all kinds of great content, how-tos, and hopefully we're going to be doing a little bit more content with the guys at ODGG Supply towards the end of the month. So stay tuned for that. But that does it for today's episode of The Backlash. We will be back Wednesday at the same time as today, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time, with Mark Mitchell from Rasmussen Reports. So please tune in for that. It's going to be a great show. We're going to learn a lot. God bless, and have a good day. Bye-bye.